Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 72 of the Former Action Guys podcast, and I'm your host, Justin Kramer. This week I have on the show Infantry Officer Thomas Schueman. He was he's currently he's teaching literature at the Naval Academy right now. Prior to that, though, we really get into his time getting to the fleet and being with Kilo 35 during their deployment to Sangin in 2010. And I'll tell you what, the stories about some of the battles there are just intense. So if you're listening, be aware of that. He talks about how they lost, either injured or killed like 11 of their 13 combat engineers they had attached to their unit that were doing point on their patrols and stuff like that because of the IEDs and stuff. But they're not victims. 3-5 is not victims. And I think that's one of the most important lessons that come out of this podcast is that 3-5 fought hard and they're warriors and they killed a ton of Taliban. And so it's not like they just took casualties and didn't do any fighting back. There was a lot of fighting going on there. And I think he does a really good job of explaining and giving credit to to all the Marines that were around him that he was working with. It's amazing the amount of names that he remembers. And he just goes through and talks about individual actions and what some of the guys did, all the way down from the, Lance Corporals on foot patrols to guys controlling air from the COCs and stuff like that, and bringing in fire support assets to support the guys on the ground. Great story, amazing story. It's, the fight and Sangin for 3-5 is something that will be told through, that is in the history books. That is something that will be remembered. And I hope that Marines, current Marines are still learning and hearing about, what happened in Sangin and how hard that fight was for those guys and how well they fought back and brought the fight to the enemy as well. So really good podcast. I did do a live stream on this one. I'm going to keep trying to do live streams, and because honestly, it cuts down on my editing time. And I don't have to wait 3 hours for a video to upload to YouTube and then another 3 hours for YouTube to process it. It just happens. And I'm a full-time student now. I'm back into school, 6 classes. So I need as much time as I can get. So I'm going to keep trying to do live streams when I can. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Former Action Guys podcast on YouTube, and you'll get those notifications and you can jump in on the live streams. About 2/3 of the way, or maybe 3/4 of the way through, we lost his video for some reason. I'm not sure what happened. So we do pause there and then kind of, I'll cut that piece out and pick it back up, but that is what happened there. But yeah, man, outside of that, make sure to hit up my website, jkramergraphics.com. My Instagram's at jkramergraphics or at Former Action Guys, and enjoy the episode. All right, you ready to do this?
Let's do it, man.
All right, man. Well, welcome to the Former Action Guys podcast. So today, what would you rather be called, Tom or Thomas?
Yeah, Tom's good.
All right. So Tom Schueman, correct? I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that correct. Tom Schueman's on the podcast today. Infantry officer, multiple deployments to Afghanistan, OEF. I saw that you were an advisor as well, which is cool. I did the advisor thing in 2013. So you're the first infantry officer I've had on the podcast. I've actually had an infantry weapons officer, a gunner on, but
okay.
You're the first IOC graduate. So I'd like you to start out by telling us where you're from. Why'd you decide to join the Marine Corps over one branch or another? And why'd you decide to go infantry?
Okay. Yeah, I'm from the south side of Chicago. I grew up in the neighborhood in the southwest part of the city. Mom's a Chicago cop. Why kind of what brought me to the Marine Corps? 9/11 it would be the most direct answer.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have really any family or exposure to the military growing up. I didn't know anyone that served. I didn't know a Marine at all. I just knew that when 9/11 happened, I was sitting in second and third period, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something about that someday. Yeah. And how that manifested was I could have never predicted, but that was like my first kind of impetus that I knew that I needed. And just like many of us at that time, I didn't realize that there were bad people in the world that would like to do America harm. And that was like my first kind of realization that, hey, there's this kind of blanket of freedom or security that we're all enjoying, and that I absolutely took for granted for the first 15 years of my life. And then I said, maybe I should participate in that. And then the other kind of motivation behind my service is my mom. She didn't graduate high school. She had a really, really rough upbringing. We grew up, initially like pretty poor, single mom raising two kids.
Yep.
She was a bartender, and she, so she eventually got hired on with a CPD when we were about 6 or 7 years old, and kind of started, things started to improve a little bit. But just the amount of hard work and sacrifices that my mom made for me to provide opportunities that she never had for herself or never dreamed of for herself.
Yeah.
I thought, that's pretty special.
For sure.
Mattis there's a quote in a speech of his. It's called "The Meaning of Their Service." He says, "America's like a bank. Somebody's got to put in, make the contributions to kind of keep this thing going. If everyone's just taking out, no one's putting in, it doesn't work like that."
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess there was some kind of civic duty that I felt like, if we can come from food stamps and nothing, and now I'm at, a nice private college in downtown Chicago, through a lot of hard work, I felt like, I wanted to pay back into a country that provides people those kind of opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't apply for ROTC while I was in high school, because I was the first person to go to college in my family, and didn't know anything about college, didn't know how to apply for scholarships, didn't know anything really. So I started to look for ways to kind of pay for my school, because Loyola is pretty pricey. And I found the ROTC scholarship, I applied for it, and I didn't get it for the first 2 years. I still had to pay my way through school. And so I continued to kind of work at Costco back on the south side of Chicago, in the tire shop throughout my time in college. But I still did the ROTC stuff, even though I wasn't getting paid for it.
Nice.
And so, lots of early mornings drilling up at Northwestern, commuting back and forth between Loyola and Northwestern, because that's where our ROTC unit was. And when I went to my little ROTC boot camp week, which is, it's just, that's a bastardization of that term, but it's just like the little week that you go up to Great Lakes Naval Base for your first year in ROTC, and they yell at you for a week. And I just saw the seniors who wanted to be Marines and how they kind of look and conducted themselves. And I looked at the other midshipmen that wanted to go to the Navy, and I thought, I think I like those guys. And so that was my first kind of, and so ended up becoming a Marine option, went to OCS, got commissioned in 2008. Went to TBS still without knowing much about the Marine Corps, much about what the infantry was, or total boot.
Real quick, how was OCS for you? Like, how was that? The reality of going from a kid on the street, college kid. You did like a little intro to boot camp going to Great Lakes, which I'm from Lafayette, Indiana originally, so I know all these places. My dad used to work next to Great Lakes on the Army base there at Fort Sheridan. So going from like a kid on the street to your like introduction into boot camp, like how was that for you?
Yeah, the OCS was jarring, no doubt. The sergeant instructors there are real professionals and very good at their job, all DIs at some point. So I went to OCS for the first time in 2006 because I didn't know if I was going to ever get the ROTC scholarship. So there's one of the OCS options is that you go for 2 6-week summers. So I was going to do that one in preparation of not getting the scholarship from ROTC. And so in 2006 I went, and I think it was Colonel Chase was the CO, and I just remember you'd be running up the hills and he'd be like just looking at you with disgust and telling you like, you suck candidate, like you're weak, and getting foot lockers. Same stories that everybody
just
has.
A classic boot camp experience.
Yeah.
Was it what you expected though?
I'm such an idiot when it comes to all this stuff. I didn't know my ass from my elbow when it comes to anything military related. I don't even, I probably never saw Full Metal Jacket. I probably just,
Oh, really?
I don't know what the hell I expected when I showed up.
I think everybody crushes Full Metal Jacket before they go to boot camp.
Yeah, like I said, there's no one like kind of more naive, ignorant, or boot than I was starting all this stuff off, and so it was. Yeah, I mean, when you dump your sea bag on the parade deck and your whole world starts to get turned upside down, it was
It becomes
shocking.
very real very fast.
Yeah, and but by the end of it, I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I loved it. I was all in. I liked the pain. I liked the yelling. I liked so I started to kind of see like, yeah, this is something that I'm into. So yeah, I then I went back again in '08. It was a little bit easier in '08 because I was with all the ROTC midshipmen who had
Hmm.
never been to OCS yet, and so I was kind of had a little bit of experience. But yeah, OCS was fine,
Yeah,
and it does a good job of kind of indoctrinating you into the Marine Corps, and that's what it's trying to do, and I think it does a good job.
that's good, man. Well, so OCS is considered by a lot of people to be like one of the hardest things you can do while you're in the military or in the Marine Corps, at least. I've talked to multiple infantry officers that have told me that that's the hardest thing they've ever done physically. Would you concur with that assessment?
In '06, the standards at OCS were, I felt, really high. We were running very fast all the time. I was the juniors. I was PLC juniors OCS, and then the seniors OCS. I know had like over a 50% attrition rate.
Hmm.
Um, it's definitely a PT school. Is it the hardest thing I've done? No. I mean, I think there were definitely
Or,
parts of IOC that were.
sorry, that's what I meant. I meant IOC. I skipped ahead there. That's my bad. I was
Oh,
talking about IOC. Yeah,
yep.
infantry
Okay.
officers course for those that may not understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, so transitioning from OCS, which is drilling around, getting yelled at, to so yeah, just a quick bridge to how to get into IOC. Commissioned in '08, show up to TBS, don't know what I want to do really, and then a very similar kind of experience is that my SPC was an infantry officer, and I just see the infantry officers, and then I see the non-infantry officers, and I say, well, those guys look squared away, and
Hmm.
that's where I've kind of, and I think that's the theme of my career. Generally, I just look for where the high, what I feel like are the highest standards and the greatest challenge, and then that's what I'm drawn to. And so, um, I think two things happened at TBS that potentially secured my spot at IOC,
Hmm.
because I was average physical fitness, like maybe a little bit above average, but I definitely wasn't the top PT guy, and I definitely wasn't the smartest guy. Never have been accused of being the smartest guy in the room, no doubt about that. Uh, we did FEX 2, which is the defense at TBS,
Hmm.
and I was a machine gunner for that. And so I remember I was in the shittiest terrain you can imagine, just rocks, roots right next to a gigantic tree with really, really big roots, really hard ground. And I just had a pickaxe, and I was going to make a U-shaped fighting hole and set up my machine gun parapet. And I'm smashing into these rocks. And
Hmm.
for the first day of the defense, and my SBC walks by and he's like, "What do you think? What are you doing over here, Schueman?" I'm like, making a chest deep fighting hole, sir. He goes, "Do you think you're gonna get a chest deep fighting hole by the end of the day tomorrow?" I'm like, "Absolutely, sir." He's like, "Unlikely, but okay." Uh, Comes back, a couple hours later. Comes back the next day, and sure enough, I got a chest deep fighting hole. And I
Challenge
think,
accepted.
yeah, so I think this guy thought, well, this guy may be just dumb enough to be a grunt, stubborn enough to be a grunt, that's over there, swinging this pickaxe into this hard ass dirt for 48 hours nonstop. And so I think that was like kind of the first thing, is just like my attitude, my effort. I think maybe my SBC noticed that. And then we had a PT session on a Saturday, and I remember everyone had a really kind of crappy attitude about it. And for me, like TBS the whole time was just like, whatever, just going to do it, just going to get through it. It is what it is.
Hmm.
And so again, probably, I mean, nowhere near like the most physically fit guy in my TBS platoon, but we did like a double oak course, and we ran over to this LZ, and we had to throw a sandbag across the LZ, and like bear crawl across the LZ, and then take a squad orders test or something. And I finished like well in front of everybody, and then finished. And by no means should I have finished in front of everybody. It was just like everybody else had such a pissy attitude about it, and was like maybe hungover from the night before. I don't know, but I just remember like when we finished that PT event, my SBC like was like, "What the hell is your guys' problem? Like all you are being so pissy about that you got a PT this morning. Like I don't know why Schueman like finished first. He's like, what the hell is wrong with everyone? Like suck it up and just." And so I think people ask a lot about how you get your IOC spot or how you go to IOC, and maybe I'm totally, but those are the only two things that I can remember where when I was at the base school, it was just I always had my attitude was like, well, just going to do it and just put forth my best effort, and I guess maybe my SBC noticed.
Yeah, no, it's tough. I mean, I guess that's something a lot of people that aren't exposed to it don't know, is that you don't really get to choose your job as an officer. You just kind of fall in. You get the pick like rankings of what you'd like to do, but nothing's guaranteed there except for like flight contracts and stuff like that. Yep. So were you excited like when they told you like, hey, you're going to IOC?
Yeah, I mean at that point, I mean, I started to kind of, even though none of us know for sure if we're getting infantry or not, you kind of start to kind of bond with the other guys who who are going to put infantry number one, and you kind of already start the infantry versus person other than grunt kind of mentality, and I think
all the boots do that.
Yeah, so I think I really was like, these are my people. These aren't maybe not so much my people, and so I would have been extremely crushed if I had not got infantry. Your SVC towards the end, just starts to go down the list and calling everybody out, and same with her. And yeah, had I not heard 0302, I think I don't know what I would have done, but it would have been a crushing.
There's so many people that have their dreams crushed. Every class that goes through, that. And the tough thing too, I guess a lot of people don't realize either, is how they do it in thirds, how they take the top third, middle third, bottom third, so that the top guys don't all go to one job, so they break it up. Do you like that? Spread. Do you like how they do that?
I mean, the quality spread, to some degree, it makes sense that you don't want, like, let's say an MOS that's not desirable, that maybe like not a lot of people want to do. I don't know, maybe comm. Like you don't want all the bottom third to go to comm, because talking's pretty important.
Yeah.
So you need somebody over there that is good at communicating and can run that. Comm platoon commanders have like almost 100 Marines or something like that. It's a substantial job when you check in as the comm second lieutenant.
A lot of Marines and a lot of gear.
Yeah. So do you want all the bottom 1/3 who didn't get to go to, like, so I think, there's some part of it to me makes sense to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a guy named Yeagle who his dad was a sergeant major, I think an infantry sergeant major, and this guy was physically fit, total stud, and we all like assumed like he was a shoo-in, right? And no, he got comm actually.
Yeah.
And I remember I was just like, his heart was broken, and we all felt devastated for him. But so that was the one in my platoon that were like, oh shit, like can't believe that happened.
That's tough, yeah.
But ended up at IOC with a great group of guys, 4 TAC 09. It's a phenomenal group of guys who, a lot of my guys in my IOC class, I would be willing to bet or argue that my IOC class probably had more officers wounded in action and killed in action than any other class probably since Vietnam.
Really?
I had to guess that 4 TAC 09 class. Yeah.
Man.
But
that's a horrible record to have.
Yeah. Well, we all ended up in Afghanistan in 09 through 11, and so it was.
It's a tough time, man. That was you came in while Iraq was waning, and Afghanistan picked up. I think that's around the time that they started the surge, right? Obama came into office, and then he wanted to surge troops. He wanted to finish Iraq and then surge guys in Afghanistan.
Yeah, so Petraeus wanted to surge, um, and I think we were definitely, yeah, we were all surge guys for sure.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
crazy, man. How was so before we move on to like the stuff you guys did or getting into your deployment to Afghanistan and stuff like that, what were some of the key things from IOC that you remember? Or maybe advice you can give someone that may be considering infantry officer as a specialty.
yeah, when you asked is what about like how tough it was or the physical. I mean, IOC was everything I could have ever hoped or dreamed of, and so much more.
Mm-hmm.
I could not drink the Kool-Aid fast enough. I was just like, from a fire hose, give me more, give me
Give me
more.
all of it. I love it.
Yeah, dude. And it was yeah. And so, you know, it really took me from this little kind of city kid boy, and I turned me into a wild animal, like the straight up
Mm-hmm.
animal. And just loving violence, loving savage, brutish shit, out there ground fighting every day, just getting choked, punched in the face, and just you know choking other people out. It was not unlike anything I obviously had ever experienced. But and then, I mean, you're doing something physical every day. You are almost every week shooting some kind of machine gun, rocket. It's throwing
Mm-hmm.
grenades. It's really
It's hard not to have fun with something like that, right?
it to me it was so much fun.
Yeah.
And it was like I said, and a significant part of it is I had a great group of guys that I was with, that are very near and dear to my heart, still very good friends of mine. And then we had really good instructors. Like the quality of the captain, over at the infantry officer course was just outstanding. Just really great cadre over there, of instructors. And so, um, it's the hikes are extremely heavy, and fast. So that to me is probably like the most, if anything you're going to prepare, and it's not like any secret, is it's we wear very heavy packs and heavy loads, and we walk very long distances. So
Yeah, if you're not out on your feet and you're wanting to be infantry, you better change that up. Get out there and start putting some miles in.
yeah, and then there's the combat endurance test. It's the very first thing you're going to do when you show up, and if you don't pass the CET, then you don't go to IOC. And so,
There's a lot of people that right there cuts out a lot of your class, doesn't it?
yeah, and when I went through this, the standards weren't, I think, so codified. It was more like, uh, if you're a good dude who's fit and like aggressive, I feel like you kind of made it through.
Mm-hmm.
But in within the last several years, I think everything is very black and white. It's like, okay, you met the time, you did not meet the time. And so these days, I think the attrition up front with the CT it's significant, and it's much higher.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, you got to show up day one and crush the CT. Like it's going to be like 12-hour evolution.
It,
And
isn't that's the piece of it that so females have been going to the infantry officer course. I think there's been like 15 so far that have attempted it. Don't most of them not make it past that initial test right there? Like they get injured or something happens in that phase. Which and that's not a hit on the females because there's a ton of dudes that don't make it past that either.
correct. Yeah, I think that is where most people wash out. Period. And then, but there's been several who have passed the CT who've then gone on to kind of, I think, get injured throughout the course.
Yeah,
But we also have had a couple graduate at this point, as well. So,
yeah.
but yeah, I think that is that's for sure is probably the initial kind of filter.
Okay. What do you think is the what did you learn at IOC that kind of stuck with you the longest?
Just to be aggressive,
Yeah.
and I think that's what's the hallmark of my career. Or maybe if you look at all my fit reps, I
Mm-hmm.
think the first comment in every section I is aggressive, something aggressive. And I wasn't like that really, growing up. I mean, it's something that happened at IOC. Like I said, there was a transformation there that, and so being aggressive and being violent and, if you read Rommel's attacks, just get after it, just attack. And so I'm a guy that I think IOC just helped me I'm always to a fault. I always just am like, gonna push. It's got me in trouble a couple times. But I think just overall, the thing that lasted was the most significant impact with me is it just changed me into this kind of really aggressive person that just loves to attack, loves to get after it. And I talk about the kind of three things that you need as a leader: character, compassion, and competence. And you can leave IOC with the assurance that you're ready to step in front of that platoon on day one. Like, how to run an ambush, how to run a raid, you can patrol, you can set up a defense, you can do call for fire, how to do combined arms, how to work machine guns. And so I think the methodology of the school to prepare you to start leading an infantry platoon on day one is significant. And if you pay attention there, I think you do have the baseline knowledge that you need to be successful as an infantry platoon commander. And so the course works. Of course, there's much more to learn throughout, but you can leave that course competent and ready to lead an infantry platoon. So all the technical skills, all the hard skills, is going to provide you that. I think day one.
When you were coming to the end, did you have a unit that you wanted to get assigned to? Is there like a unit that infantry officers finishing up IOC are like, oh, I really want to go to this one, or do you guys not even know anything about it?
Again, I didn't. So I didn't, because I wasn't on scholarship when I was on RTC. I didn't get to do any like little cruises during the summers where some guys get to go on these Marine Air Ground Task Force cruises, the MAGTF cruises. I didn't have an opportunity, or they go on like Pro-Trimid, which is another kind of little summer cruise. And I'm here. Right now I'm talking to you from the Naval Academy, and so the midshipmen here at the Naval Academy who are interested in going Marines get some opportunities to kind of go to the different bases during their summers. And so I didn't know much, but you do get to rank where you'd like to go. I think it means probably very little, if I had to guess. But I ranked Southern California, and I assumed Laguna Beach and San Diego were like nice places. So I think, so I think I put like Pendleton first, and then I just put Lejeune last. And it was only, I think 9 of us went to 3-5, and then a couple guys went to 1-4. So it was actually, out of the 100-man class, probably like 12 of us ended up going out to Camp Pendleton, which is pretty small, I think. And so I didn't know, I still didn't know my Marine Corps history really well, sadly. And I don't know if I knew what battalion I wanted to go to. I just knew I wanted to get to Pendleton. And then, going to Pendleton, going to 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. And
what was it like, man? What was it like checking in, brand new officer, 2nd lieutenant, walking up in your alphas? Were you like pumped?
Pumped, a little nervous for sure.
Yeah.
When I found out I was going to 3-5, I started to read With the Old by E.B. Sledge.
Good book.
And so I was starting to get pretty motivated about so going to 3-5, and check in with Sergeant Major Bushway and at the time Lieutenant Colonel Morris, who's now General Morris, and find out which companies we're going to. And I'm going to Kilo 35, and I'm reading, with the old breed about Kilo 35. And I would say that my excitement level was really, really high. And
you're getting that classic Marine Corps experience, walking in. I think it's so. I could tell someone like you appreciates that history, right? And that's kind of how I was when I came in as well. Like, I wasn't supposed to go to Parris Island for boot camp. I was supposed to go to San Diego because I'm from Indiana. But I requested Paris Island because that's all I'd ever read about in all the old books about like Chesty Puller going to Paris Island. And, that was like the classic Marine Corps experience in my mind. So I actually requested to go there because of the history behind it. I wanted to be a part of that. And I think that, walking in the footsteps of the giants that came before us is like a huge motivator for a significant amount of people that are in the force and the people that really like understand and cherish the history of the Marine Corps and the units that they get involved with. When you got to 3-5, what year was this? When did you show up?
September 2009.
Okay. When you got there, what's like for an infantry officer coming to the fleet, like what's your, what kind of roles were you put in? Were you immediately put into a platoon commander position or?
Yep. Immediately. Okay. Not a whole lot of turnover. Like I said, the Colonel Morris and the Sergeant Major kind of broke us out into what companies we were going to. I took over first platoon, and from day one, we went out to the field that night, got out of our alphas, and the Marines were doing a patrolling exercise out in the tomato patch and in San Mateo. And that's the other thing is like San Mateo is really just God's country. Like it's this little nexus on the north side of Camp Pendleton where you're right near trestles and beautiful area with this hills, and it's just this little enclave of infantrymen that are kind of away from the rest of the base, and it is an awesome place to be.
Yeah, it's not a bad place to be right there on the edge of Orange County and stuff like that. Trestles is a great spot for if anybody's on Camp Pendleton and hasn't gone down to Trestles to watch the surfers and stuff, or surf yourself, then you need to get out there and check it out. So you get out to the field. Your guys are in the field. And is it like, hey, here's your guys, good luck, or like, how does that turnover go, and how does that introduction go, and how did you feel being like, oh shit, I'm in charge now, like I'm no longer just doing what I'm told?
Yeah, no, I don't think I really got much turnover at all, and I think my first platoon sergeant, he ended up getting IA'd. So he and I only worked together for maybe a month or two before he went to Iraq to do some, I think he was like on a personal security detail for one of the generals or something.
So he did an individual augment deployment?
Yep.
Okay.
So I think he just, brought me over to the platoon. And I don't really remember what I said, but I hope I didn't say much. And, when I get, my page these days, my Instagram account, I think a lot of kind of junior officers follow me and kind of ask me these questions like everybody wants to know what the secret recipe is or what's the kind of magic formula and like how do you and to me my recommendation is just say, hey, happy to be here. And like that's it, like that, like you can. I think everyone has these kind of really idealistic things of how they're going to be a commander and a leader, and they want to kind of get up there and start to pontificate and let the troops know, I really love you guys. I'm really going to take care of you guys. And it's like, just shut up because it doesn't matter what you say in that moment. One, you have no credibility with the Marines, really. You have very little credibility. You have very little kind of respect at that point. Just go out there and don't say I love you guys and I'm going to take care of you guys, I'm going to train you guys, and we're going to be just start doing it.
Just start working. Yeah.
And that's the only way you're going to get the credibility or the respect is when they see that you're competent, and they'll know that you care about them by the way that you treat them and train them. And so just I don't know what I said. I hope I didn't say much.
That's funny. It's that initial like that what you're talking about kind of transcends rank, because you show up to the fleet as an enlisted guy as a boot, and it's the same thing. Like the dudes you meet when you first show up, they don't care. Like, shut up, dude. Go take out the trash. Let's go get ready to go to the field, and then you're gonna learn your job. Like, you're not here. We always said when I was at 10th Marines over at Camp Lejeune, a lot of our guys were boots. They didn't really get a lot of respect until they went to like Fort Bragg, which means they'd been in the fleet for a little bit. They'd done some field ops around Lejeune, and then they'd go to Fort Bragg twice a year for a month. And it was like after that one, solid month in the field coming out of that, if you're still like legit, like if we trust you and you understand the job and the equipment, then you're part of the team, man. But if you're that guy that just like, that's where you identify people that are going to be good Marines and good in their MOS, and then guys that just aren't going to hack it. And like what you're saying, like showing up and just shut up and, just do the work. Yeah, that's the best advice you can do, because no one cares about you. It's just how it is. No one cares about you because they don't know you, and you're just a random person right now. So it's pretty funny. At what point did you guys find out, like, hey, we're going to be deploying soon? Like, there's going to be a deployment coming up.
Yeah, so I checked in kind of this awkward period because 3-5 had done Phantom Fury, and so you still had some of those guys kicking around, but most of them had left by that point. And then they did another, I think like an 08 Iraq deployment, which I think was not like too kinetic, but they had just come off of a MU, 31st MU, and so it's tough to check into this unit who you knew like get some, right? 3-5 get some, and who had just been in all their. So all my Marines were these kind of salty Lance Corporal 31st MU warriors, and all their seniors were all the Fallujah guys, and so they kind of a little bit jaded that they missed it, so
which is crazy, right? Which is, I think people on the outside of the military, it's hard to understand that kind of, like you're upset you didn't get to go into like one of the deadliest battles of Iraq. It's like, why would you want to put yourself in that? But it's different for Marines that want to get out there and do the job. That's a good point.
And so the morale was like pretty low, and the attitudes were pretty shitty, and everyone thinks they treat you like, okay, you're the boot lieutenant. It's like, okay, like I'm tracking, I am the boot lieutenant, and I'm tracking, I have a lot to learn, but like all you Lance Corporals that are so salty, like you went to Okinawa, like just relax. And so it was initially like very, very challenging as I think being a peacetime officer, especially like a platoon commander, is significantly harder than being a wartime officer or platoon commander.
Yeah.
And so when I checked in, we were going on another 31st MU, and so like everybody that had any kind of experience at that point was like, I'm getting out of here. And so morale was low. All the kind of guys with prior experience in combat had pretty much left. And right before Christmas, I want to say right before Christmas, Colonel Morris given the kind of safety brief and says, hey, we're going to Afghanistan. And it was just a pivot. In that moment, like everything changed. My life became so much easier on a dime. And it was like, okay.
In what way? How so?
Yeah, it was like, hey, if you want to continue to malinger, be a little bitch about stuff, you want to like continue to have all these discipline issues, not everybody is going to make it on this team. Like, this is, there's a force cap. We knew there was going to be a force cap. We knew we were going to have to cut some guys, like not I had over 40 guys on the platoon. I can't remember like what the number was that we were going to be able to bring, but we knew anywhere between like 6 to 8 guys were going to end up getting put on the chopping block. And so it was like, hey, you want to go keep acting like a jerk and not,
So that's fine. Good. I mean, you get to like legitimately, separate the wheat from the chaff, get rid of the guys that are holding you back right before deployment, and that's really what you want. Did you guys know you were going to Sangin, and what was the kind of was there any kind of reputation at that point? Because that's still kind of a newer area for Marines.
Correct. No, I don't think like initially we knew we were going to Sangin. But well, just to kind of close out that, like once we found out we were going to combat, I mean, that is, Marines are like a warrior without a war it's like this listless kind of buoy out in the ocean. And once you say we're going to war, like everyone becomes locked in, focused. We understand the gravity now. And so it was,
it's real.
Yeah. And so it was, the remainder of that workup was awesome. Because my guys were super focused and super motivated and dialed in, and everybody, gave the maximum effort understanding where we're headed. And so, we 1-5 came back from Afghanistan, um, and their deployment was they didn't deploy to Sangin, and they were very distributed, I think, and there was some definitely kinetic pockets of that deployment, but it was kind of they were doing a good bit of coin stuff
Mm-hmm.
still, and so. But I remember we sat down. I think it's called the Riff there in San Mateo, and we sat down in this little classroom, and they were kind of giving us some after action points and debrief points, and I'm definitely scribbling everything down, and so we got like that was our first little bit of taught idea of Afghanistan, but still no, not really Sangin. What made Sangin pretty real is that so we ripped out 37 Kilo Company,
Mm-hmm.
and their company commander came and talked to us, and their company commander had been medevaced. So his company was still there in Sangin, and this guy Cohen, who is now Lieutenant Colonel Cohen and a battalion commander, who has a just absolute cult-like following within the Marine Corps. He's absolute savage, awesome Marine officer. And that 37 Kilo Company that he created, those guys were some of my best friends actually. My enlisted Marines that came out of that company are just a phenomenal company.
Mm-hmm.
But so when he came back, he's talking to us, and it's like, okay, here's the company commander of the unit we're about to go replace,
Yeah.
who isn't there because he's been blown up so many times and saying that he's been medevaced, and he's telling us about what it's like, and it's like, oh shit, like this is gonna be the. So yeah, I think that
What was
was
it?
kind
What
of
was it
when.
like? What was he saying it was like?
Uh, I mean, the company was they ended up they ripped out with the British,
Yeah.
and the Sangin more British casualties happened in Sangin than any other district or any other place in the entire Afghan war,
Mm-hmm.
and so they their turnover for them taking over from the British was like, yeah, this place is pretty deadly, pretty lethal, pretty kinetic place, and but the British, I think, had a kind of different strategy than us, where they were kind of doing like many small little outposts,
Mm-hmm.
which limits your ability to mass like combat power or force when you go out if you kind of have all these distributed places. And so I think the British would kind of get outside the base and pretty quickly kind of culminate and not be able to fight too much. I mean, they did plenty of fighting, no doubt. I don't want to like ever kind of suggest that they didn't, but either
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
we're Marines, and we're like, okay, well, so what did 37 Kilo Company do? Is they said, all right, we're gonna make like our way to the Helmand River, and they went out and they cleared from Fob Inkerman and kind of make like PB to patrol base fires all the way up to kind of the river. Planted the 37 Kilo guy down on the river. Said, look, we're Marines. We can go anywhere, do anything, and then waited for us to show up. And so, yeah, I think what was he talking about is like, yeah, I mean, it's the Wild West out there,
Mm-hmm.
and so it
Yeah,
was.
from what I've been told or what I've read as well, the Brits that were there, kind of what they were doing is trying to be like supporting positions all over the place rather than like a main base with like maybe a patrol base or two out there. And what it did was it spread their forces kind of thin, and then in conjunction with the attacks that they were receiving, it made it where the most that they could do is do local patrols around the base, around the fob or whatever you want to call it, the patrol base, and not
Yeah.
actually push out and be on the offensive. Is that kind of the gist of what was going on?
Yeah, I think they call it like ink blot might be the method that
Yeah.
you're describing. So yeah, no, what you're describing is I would exactly. I don't have anything to add. That's how I understand it as well.
So when you're getting ready to go, man, like this is it. Like you did OCS, you did IOC. You got to your platoon. You're in the fleet. You're an infantry officer. You made it, and now it's time to go. Earn your pay. What was going through your mind before that first deployment, like telling your family goodbye and like, hey, I'll see you guys on the other end?
Yeah, I I think I still didn't even come close to having an appreciation for what I was about to enter into.
Mm-hmm.
Still, like, never kind of thought about my own mortality. Never kind of thought about like, I just, although I, had started to become a decently avid reader, like none of it was, I think none of it was like still like clicking.
Mm-hmm.
And while I probably could have had a maybe more realistic or less idealistic kind of ideas about what I was about to venture into, I think no matter what, nothing would have prepared me for what singing ended up being. And so saying goodbye, I mean, yeah, I guess I never really considered that I wasn't going to come back, which very soon after touching down, I did start to really consider that. But
So when you got there, did you guys fly into Leatherneck and then
yeah,
helo into Sangin?
yeah, and so even so, my IOC instructors, you got to think like many of them left the fleet in '08 and had done like the late Iraq deployments, and
Mm-hmm.
they were really, it was IOC was really coin heavy. So and then the Marine Corps at large, '08, '09, because of the successes that we had in Iraq with the awakening and coin and everything, like we were just getting fed the coin Kool-Aid over and over and over again, hearts and minds, Tashakur, Assalamu alaikum, shaking hands, just
Yeah.
Pashtun Wali. And I remember the book I read on the plane over to Afghanistan was 3 Cups of Tea. And I was going to like have these cups of tea and the Afghans were going to love me. And then,
You're going to make the difference.
yeah, and they just all they need to know is like that we care and we want the best for them, and they're gonna be like, oh my God, America, you're so nice. We want to
We
be
love
friends.
democracy.
Yeah, and so I was that's what I thought, and we get to Leatherneck, and I remember there's like Kayako, like the culture and language people,
Mm-hmm.
give you a little brief during your RSO and I at Leatherneck, and I pulled my squad leaders in. I'm like, hey, here's these little language smart packs. Make sure you know how to say thank you and please and how are you. And I'm still, even right before we cross line departure, I'm still thinking that this is going to be the tone or how we're going to go win this war.
Was that thought
And
process? But was that thought process kind of? Were you on that? Were you thinking that way because the battalion was thinking that way, or were you kind of on your own, like, oh, I'm very, idealistic, and I can make the difference?
I mean, that's just how I was trained,
Yeah.
from IOC through. I mean, although, like I said, IOC definitely turned me into a savage and aggressive and made me violent. And in our workup, whether it was when we were out at Bridgeport, or we also got to go spend a month in Korea. Kilo 35 got to go out to Korea and do a month long kind of essentially live fire exercises the whole time we were out there, and then we did Enhanced Mojave Viper, right? And so there was, I mean, there were plenty of like very very aggressive workup, and Kilo really earned a reputation for being our call sign sledgehammer, and so we definitely lived up to kind of that reputation. But even at EMB at the time, they called them like Chub or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
so even the structure of EMB, like the big kind of culminating exercises besides like range 400 or 410, was you still did like a week of coin, and you went in and they had all the role players, and the idea was still to like win all the hearts and minds of the village. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think probably most of us had that idea that that's what we were going to do. I remember most of us, except maybe one lieutenant, that maybe had a better appreciation for what we were about to do, and that was Robert Kelly. And I remember when we found out that we were going to Sangin, I was like super pumped. That's all I wanted to do. And I go up to Rob, who was an assaultman with 1-8, and he was in Phantom Fury in Fallujah when he was enlisted. And I was like, he was the Lehman Company platoon commander. I was Kilo. We were just right across the hall from one another. And I went over to the Lehman platoon commander office. And I'm like, dude, like, it's awesome. We're going. This is going to be so great. And he was like,
Careful
yeah,
what you wish for.
yeah. And so he understood the realities of combat and the rules of war where young men die, someone has to walk point, and you can't change rule number one. He kind of understood that, and so he wasn't necessarily so excited that this was going to be the new mission. But yeah, I still think most of us were pretty idealistic that we were going to go over and we were going to that's how we were going to win the war. And yeah,
Did you guys helo into Sangin, or did you fly
yep,
or drive in?
yeah, we know we took 53s from Leatherneck into Kilo Company, went into the fob increment. The roads into Sangin were not good. It was a significant, like our logistics lagged almost the whole time till we did where we finally cleared it's called Route 611.
Yep.
But until we cleared that route, the logistics driving in and out of Sangin were it's pretty brutal. So no, most things got flown in. So we flew in. At that point, Kilo 37 had fob increment. They had patrol base transformer and patrol base fires were kind of the three battle positions when we first touched down.
Transformer we used to go to. So I was in Sangin in 13 as an Afghan National Army advisor, and I don't know some of the names that you're talking about just because when we were there, they were starting to use the Afghan names for the patrol bases.
Yep.
So I was at Transformers 1. We would go up to PB Cuba, Shamshirdu, which was like in the green zone between it's like outside the bazaar. If you're going north on 611, outside the bazaar, and then probably about a mile, and then you go into the green zone of a couple hundred meters into the green zone between 611 and the river, and they had a patrol base there, and that's kind of where we operated at. But when you guys got there, there was nothing. I got there, 611 was starting to be paved, which was a huge deal because guys like you and 7th Marines that were there having to deal with that IED threat, and it's a lot harder to find an IED when the road is dirt than when it's paved. And I know that's a project that they had been trying to work on for a long time, is to pave that road in order to get, I think it's an electric, something for the dam up in Kajaki. That was the whole point of like securing Sangin and 611 and all that, is to get the electricity running and stuff. But, when you flew in and you were like, here I am, I'm in the green zone. Like, what did you think about the area? What did you think about, like, holy shit, like I'm actually I'm in a combat zone and there's people here that want to kill me?
Yeah. Just on the 611, the British had tried to clear that route multiple times and were never successful kind of clearing that route. And then we finally did our big op where we just mick-licked the shit out of the road and secured kind of both sides of the road to allow that route clearance platoon just to mick-lick after mick-lick. And so that was a big deal to get that road finally kind of cleared of all those IEDs, because it was like you're saying, there were always IEDs in the 611 and they could throw them in and take them out so quick because it's just all moon dust and whatever. But what does it feel like? Well,
real quick, for those that don't know, a mick-lick is the mine clearing line charge. It's just basically a big tube of C4 or whatever explosives to blow up and sympathetically detonate other like IEDs and mines and stuff. I just want to clear that up for anybody that may not know.
Kilo 37, again, I have nothing but respect and admiration and love for that unit, whether it's Cohen or the Lopez brothers. There's just a tremendous amount of respect, and to me, Kilo 37 has one of the greatest legacies of any unit in the entire Marine Corps, whether that's Corporal Dunham with Lieutenant Colonel Gibson at the time, Captain Gibson, Trent Gibson. So just what a great unit. But they painted us a pretty scary picture, and kind of made the enemy out to be 10 foot tall, and they're like, well, you can't go into the buildings because all the doors are IED'd, and if you try to go over the walls, they've got IEDs on the top of the wall, so you can't like put a ladder to get over the walls, and everywhere and they're like, this is no-go area, like this, you can't go
Don't
here,
go in the brown
like,
zone.
And so it was like, okay, well, like, shit, it seems like you can't do anything in this place, like, and before even the rest of my platoon was on deck, or the entire company was on deck, I was tasked to secure 3 battalion NAIs, named area of interest. And one was a HIMARS shot that they had never done a BDA on, way farther north than anybody had ever been. One was where they thought like an HVT might be, and I can't remember what the other NAI was. Oh, it was like a possible weapons cache. And so I'm planning this op. I had 96 Marines on this patrol, and I didn't have your traditional left seat, right seat. My first time outside the wire, I was running a 96-man patrol for a 3-day operation, and
Really,
we had a couple of the 3-7 guys out there. There was one 3-7 platoon commander was out there. I think one of the 3-7 EOD guys was out there, and then like one of the 3-7 snipers, a couple of 3-7 snipers were out there with our. And so I had the entire sniper team. So our sniper team from Kilo 35 is called Banshee, and some of the best Marines I've ever served with, Sergeant Metabate, Navy Cross recipient, Browning, Laird, Ruiz. I mean, just an incredible group. Sully, great group. So I had the whole squad of snipers out there with me. I had all the EOD, I had all our engineers. I mean, and we weren't even halfway out of the ECP, out of patrol base fires, out of the entry control point, and we were in a complex ambush. So I think that's what that really was like my welcome
set the tone.
You can't even. I'm not even out of the base yet, and we've got an IED in front of us and multiple PCAMs firing at us from different directions, and I don't even have half of my unit.
They're not even, they're still making their way out of the ECP.
Yeah.
What was that like being, so, I mean, you're in it, man. You know, you're getting shot at. It's happening.
Yep.
What's going through the head of the of an officer, you know, that's in the middle of this, that's expected to direct and lead, you know, the actions to fight back against the guys that are attacking you?
Yeah. Well, as I was trying to move up to the front of my patrol, because they said there's an IED up there, and I was just kind of go up and assess the situation, but we're still under fire. And at the time, the corn was really high, and so the corn was like 10 feet high. It was all overhead, and it was dense, and you get completely kind of lost in these cornfields. And so I remember I was trying to bound from one cornfield to the next cornfield, and there was a small clearing between the two, and I was with my machine gun section leader, Corporal Nykirk, and the lieutenant from 3-7 was with me, and we went to bound. And as we went to bound across this cornfield, a PCAM fired down, essentially it's PDF out of this murder hole.
Mm-hmm.
And we dove behind this pile of poppy. And while the pile of poppy was stacked like 6 feet high, and it was out there kind of drying, while it provided some concealment, it did not provide any cover, right? And so the guy is just firing through this thing of poppy, and I turned to my Corporal Nykirk, who had a 203 attached to his M4, and I said, hey, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to start suppressing this murder hole, and you're going to start popping some 203s into this building. Are you ready? Because I'm standing up. Stand up, start firing, shoots a couple 203 rounds. Guy stops firing. We bound across into the next cornfield. And the Kilo 37 guy turns to me and is like, Schueman, like, now that you got your car, make a decision and get us out of this fire, this situation. And I was like, dude, do you think I was interested? Like, that was what I was thinking about in that moment. Like, I don't even have my platoon out of the patrol base, and I'm getting shot with the PCAM. I'm pretty sure the car was gonna happen. I wasn't doing that I was doing that because we were going to get dead because we were we were pinned under some PCAM fire. And so then, like, what am I thinking from there? It's like, I immediately am setting up bases of fire and maneuver elements. And I remember, like, kind of what made it all really, really real is finally we get outside the base, and we get kind of like almost like an assault position. And I've got the whole 96 people kind of circled up in this one cornfield, and doing some final kind of coordination and planning with my platoon sergeant, one of my squad leaders, before we kind of tried to we were going to secure this one compound and set up that as a patrol base for the 3 days. And I remember my squad leader brings one of my Lance Corporals, this guy Lance Corporal Teague, back to me, and he says, sir, Teague just saw a guy with an AK and he shot him. I'm like, okay. He's like, the guy's dead. I'm like,
Good.
okay. And then I'm thinking like, okay, well, we're killing people. That's
we're in the war.
Killing is authorized. And so like that was like my first time. I was like, hey, this guy just killed somebody, and I'm like, all right, that's good.
Be like, good. We're in the middle of a fight here, so let's keep it up.
And so I think that was, to me, was kind of pretty interesting. I'll never forget the first time someone said, hey, this guy killed, and I just said, yes, that's what we want. And
do you think you're like kind of, I don't know, so this is your first experience with combat, this is and actually being shot at is way different than going on a range and like pretending to do a maneuver range and pretend to be shot at. It's completely different.
Yep.
Do you think the reality of that kind of set in, like oh shit, like this is real, like there's people dying now, maybe not on your end, hopefully, I don't know, obviously the story's not over, but there's people dying now, there's people shooting at us and we're returning fire. How did it change your thought process at all, or how you were looking at the I guess the problems of combat?
Clausewitz talks about like the best validation or the best kind of experience of training is actually doing it under fire, and how that nothing can kind of quite compare to the lesson. You can spend one day in combat, and that the lessons that you learn in that one day are greater than all the training lessons that you could ever learn, essentially. And it was good in one sense that I was you kind of get you feel validated in a sense, like can you shoot, move, and communicate while under fire? Like that's the to get back to kind of what you're saying, like you can do range 400, you can do range 410, and we're going to make it really stressful, and we're going to do kicking dirt in your face and throwing arty sims, and they're doing really good paints where they're telling you you're suppressed, and but you could be great at that, and the first time you actually it becomes a two-way range, you may not be able to successfully do that shoot, move, and communicate while under fire. And I think I felt good that it's like you practice. AI says, are we talking about practice? You practice, and then you get to the game, and can I actually perform in the game? And I think it was I was learning about myself. I was learning about my Marines and who can and who couldn't. And so I think knowing that, like, yes, we can do this while under fire, and validating that assumption in the first 5 minutes was good, because then we knew kind of what we were capable or not capable of. And
yeah, man, surviving that first firefight, dude, that you leave that, with a different understanding of life and combat, like it gives you appreciation of, like, I don't know, what the stressors and stuff you were talking about in training are not enough, but they're definitely good. Like, I'm not me saying that it's completely different to be in combat is different than that. It's not me saying that they shouldn't, apply those stressors while you're training for combat, because it definitely helps. But it's just different, and I think anybody that's ever been shot at, especially accurately, can tell you that it's just a different feeling when you walk away from, a situation like that. You made it out of it, you played the game and you won, or whatever you want to call it. How were your Marines? How did they kind of deal with, or, this is a lot of them, this is probably their first time in combat also. So how did everybody like react? Was it all positive? I mean,
yeah, generally overwhelmingly positive. And I had a Corporal O'Brien. He came from South Marines. He had been in Musikela. And then two of my sergeants are actually all three of my sergeant squad leaders. And then I think I had Sergeant Michaels. I had a couple of guys that had been to Iraq in 08, late 07, 08, and had like seen just a little bit of combat, but this was really like for 99% of us in in my platoon. This was our first time. And I think my Marines performed heroically, courageously. I remember one time we were in a firefight, and this one guy was this big machine gunner who kind of this huge dude that everyone always and he was like the guy that was like crouching the furthest down in the canal and not really willing to kind of get his gun up. So I mean, there were times where you learned a little bit about how somebody reacted under fire, but by and large, and that's, I mean, maybe what made the most significant impact on me throughout combat is just when you watch these PFCs and lance corporals go into action and being so selfless and exposing themselves to extreme danger and position themselves at places where the chances that they are going to be killed or injured to do this thing that they have to do, and without a second thought.
Yeah.
That to me is something that is just awe-inspiring, and I'll forever just feel like I don't deserve the privilege to kind of fight and lead such men who are willing to do such extreme things, and with complete disregard for their own lives. And so it was humbling. It was awe-inspiring, and will leave me forever indebted and grateful to have the opportunity to fight alongside the men in Kilo 35.
When you were there with 3-7, how many patrols did you guys do, like joint patrols, before it was just you?
So my squad leaders went on one or two additional kind of patrols with them. Like they were like just like local security patrols right around the base to kind of point out a couple of things. But that was my only patrol that I had Kilo 37 with me.
Oh, okay. So after that, it was just, man, one patrol out and like, all right, you got it. Welcome to the show.
Yes,
That's
it
crazy,
was really
man.
like that from the first patrol, because so a lot of the areas that we went to, like where that HIMARS shot was, and up to this HVT's house, this High Valley Target's house, like Kilo 37 hadn't been actually to these places, and so it was a baptism by fire, no doubt.
Yeah, for sure.
But I took note of that, and I made sure that when we did our turnover with Bravo 15, I tried to do my diligence to try to set them up for success, and was very methodical in our turnover, and crawl, walk, run into our turnover rather than just sprinting out the gate.
Yeah. How often, and for Kilo 35, or you can talk about the battalion in general, how often were you guys taking contact or, engaging with the enemy? Like, was it not every patrol probably, but was it a majority of patrols, or?
Yeah. So there's a quote in with the Old Breed that E.B. Sledge kind of says, like, I can't say much, and I don't know much outside of Kilo 35's AO, right? And he says he doesn't presume to know a lot about combat or a lot about anything besides like his reality with Kilo 35. And so it was every day. It was every patrol was in contact for the first 90 days.
Really?
Every patrol was in contact multiple times a patrol.
Were you guys going on, was there more than one patrol a day? Or was it like, hey, I'm going to do one patrol and then come back, and then the next squad goes out and does their patrol? Or were guys doing multiple patrols a day?
It was, between first, second, and third platoon, every platoon had a patrol out at some point throughout the day. So, I always, and initially, we had just kind of started to set up at this patrol-based fires. Well, 3-7 set up patrol-based fires, but there was such a significant force protection requirement where we had so many posts there. Vic Garcia ended up revising that position and made it much smarter, so he kind of reduced the overall requirements for the force protection. And you could read about Vic and 3rd Platoon in a book Bing West wrote called 1 Million Steps, and that's about our deployment there. And Vic
It's a good book.
Garcia, incredible. He was a prior enlisted 0369, an incredible officer, and a very dear friend of mine. But yeah, so and he actually didn't have third platoon initially. He took third platoon after one of my very best friends, Cam West, was injured. Vic was initially our weapons platoon commander, and he took over third platoon after Cam was hit. But yeah, so we had kind of have to have a whole squad on security. We had a squad on react, and then a squad out. And at any given time, like we'd have one squad out in AO, and third platoon have another squad out in kind of that area. But then, and that second platoon was all the way up at PV Transformer, so things looked a little bit different for them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we were in this area like called Juchelet, and that area around PV fires was absolutely extremely kinetic. And so there was almost no rest, because the rest squad was also QRF, and so we were almost every day that essentially you end up in a firefight where you need the QRF to kind of launch. And so you really couldn't be out there with under at least 2 squad strength, and usually a lot of time initially you had to be out there in full force with the whole platoon. So yeah, the Marines were exhausted, and you were standing post or you were fighting, and you had very little time for rest or anything else.
Yeah, you mentioned Bing West's book. Really good book. I've read it. The thing about that book I thought like really sobering is his usage of the logbook entries to like show the casualties and stuff like that, and how, to me, there were so many casualties that it was like daily. It looked like, and again, this was from his book, from his log, copying the logbook entries, but it was just like, it almost became, for me reading it seemed like it almost became an expectation, like there's going to be injuries. Like it's just not going to happen, and that obviously, that threat of being blown up or being shot or, whatever, is there constantly. That's got to just start to eat at you, that's got to be something that's that combat stress, what you hear about. How did you and your guys deal with that? And did you see any issues with that, with like just guys becoming tired of constant combat?
Yeah. So like you said, you asked how did you feel when you were saying goodbye to everybody and before you left, and I just never thought that I wouldn't be coming back, which is, again, I think maybe immature and naive. But there definitely came a point where the rate we were taking casualties, it just became not a matter of if but when.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, we have 8 or 9 Marines from 3-5 are killed within about the first week and a half. You've got Cam West, one of the platoon commanders, gets hit. You got second platoon has a mass casualty. You got Catherwood Lopez, a couple guys killed in this mass casualty. That's where Abate's Navy Cross citation comes out of. And it definitely felt like you were not gonna make it out. And I had a platoon of about 35, and I had 19 casualties in my platoon, 3 killed in action, and it was you start to think, yep, this is a flip of the coin at this point. And and in some ways that perspective gives you a really profound appreciation for life and makes you reflect on some of things pretty hard. And so I grew up more in my first month in combat than I did my prior 22 years of my life. And I made the transformation from, Joseph Campbell talks about this a lot. He's an author, and he talks about this hero's journey and this transformation, this rite of passage when you kind of go from a boy to a man. And I grew up, like I said, I think more in my first month in Sangin than I had my previous 22 years. And it forced me to think about like, hey, you probably are not going to make it out of here. If you are afforded this precious opportunity, this thing called life, like, what are you going to do differently? Because I don't think you've been really living in a meaningful and impactful way, and you kind of think about your values, and yeah, that reality set in within the first couple of weeks that this might be it.
Yeah. It's hard. I think it's hard. I remember watching the news and just constantly keeping up with what was going on when you guys were over there, because it was a huge deal. I think what the battalion lost, 26 people killed, and I think 25, 26, something like that. And I just remember being, at Camp Lejeune and reading about it, like, what the hell is going on over there? And then word coming down like, hey, we may be getting guys together as combat replacements, because like obviously every battalion already has like a preset group of people that are combat replacements that are going to come in, a third into the deployment or halfway into the deployment or whatever. But it seemed like that wasn't going to be enough. And so there was talk about, getting more guys ready to go to be combat replacements because of the amount of casualties these guys are taking. And it's just, I don't know, man. That's just crazy. That kind of constant fighting, constant threat to your life, and coming to the realization, that you may not come back. Does your mindset change, and did how you operate change after you kind of came to that realization that like, hey, I might not come back from this. This is like way worse than I thought it would be.
Yeah, we're definitely in the news a lot. NPR was out there. They did a piece down with Lima 3-5. They followed my buddy Colby Grell, another phenomenal platoon commander. They were there with Rob Kelly, those guys down in like the Wichita area down. It's important to tell this part of the story too. Is like we were taking a lot of casualties, but we were exponentially killing more bad guys, and so that it's, you don't ever want to lose sight of that, the fact that we were absolutely slaughtering the Taliban in droves. And yeah, I think I alluded to that a little bit about a mindset, and there are a lot of, I think IOC and our PTP, our workup, I think we had really great training, but there are some kind of things that you just can never prepare you for, that you experience in combat. Again, overall for a mindset, it was a significant growth mindset for me, because like I said, it really forced me to grow up and mature and crystallize my values and try to make sure that I was going to live a significant life if I was afforded this precious opportunity after I left here. But what you have to be careful of is, sometimes a unit maybe takes enough punches and they kind of go internal,
mm-hmm.
and they start to believe that the enemy is 10 foot tall, and they think like, well, you can't go out there because it's the boogeyman. And so I had to kind of always, when we would have a guy get hit or a guy get killed, we do the memorial. I think the archetype or the paradigm for how you're supposed to mourn, I think, is kind of laid out in our very first text about warriors in the Iliad. You see how you do a memorial, you honor the fallen, you cry, you laugh, you tell the stories. But the important thing is like you get back out. And so the difference between a unit that I think kind of succeeds or fails is like, if you spend too much kind of time dwelling on that, the Marines might start to adopt like a kind of victim mentality, and the best remedy for an L is a W. And so, anytime we kind of took a hard hit, I would plan the very next day a super kinetic patrol that we were going to go out there and we were going to kill a lot of bad guys. And so that to me was like the best remedy for the mindset is to get out there and get the guys a W and stack some bodies and slay some bodies, and that's a cure all for kind of some of those issues.
Yeah, you got to see that it's a two-way fight. That's tough, man. Um, a lot of my listeners come from the fire support background. What kind of fire support were you guys using out there, and how were you employing it, and how effective was it?
Yeah, we had a Staff Sergeant Talk was our JTAC. Sergeant Myers was our FO. Mad Dog Myers, he's an awesome guy, and so we had our 15 that was with us. We had a lieutenant who was an FO out there, and then we had our FAC. Every company had a FAC, and so our FAC, Chris Beardsley, he was a C-130 pilot, and he killed more guys from the COC than maybe anybody ever in Afghanistan, because for a long time, I know he had the most controls in a single day, and he had the most controls like over a 6-month period, because
Really?
we were in contact. And just, I mean, the Battle of Thanksgiving alone, where Lieutenant Will Donnelly was killed, leading his men, being the fighter leader that he was. And then Sergeant Sotelo at the time, now Gunny Sotelo, ended up receiving the Silver Star for his action that day, and McCulloch ended up receiving a Silver Star for that day. But just that day, and we had shootout. I think shootout was our the guys that were flying for us that day.
Yeah.
But there's actually a painting of it at TBS on the second deck of Haywood Hall, where there's a painting of the helicopter, the mixed skids crew flying for the Battle of Thanksgiving. And those guys were flying until they were either Winchester on ammo or bingo on fuel, touching down at Bastion, getting and staying in the cockpit. And so, I think that's one of the things that does make Marine aviation so special, is that those guys way exceeded any flight hours, definitely didn't have any chow that day, and they just flew sortie after sortie or sortie back and forth and stayed in the overhead. And for us, not only that day, but specifically that day, but many other times. So it was either TOC was out there dropping some 9 lines, but most of the controls worked back through the FAC, and this guy had his little tough book, and he was just dropping bombs, doing gun runs. This guy, Chris Beardsley. All of us in Keel Company have a lot of respect and admiration, because anytime I always talked about like having the pilot's voice, and how that composure of the pilot's voice kind of brings confidence to everybody. And so you're in a really bad situation, and you call back to the COC, and Spokes comes up, call sign Spokes, Beardsley comes up on the radio, and he's just like, "Hey, okay, all right, where you at? All right, where are the bad guys at?" It's like, "All right, I got you." And it was like, and you immediately like said, okay, like he's gonna make some, and and the same thing when you got casualties and you got hot LZs and you need those medevac birds, whether it was Dust Off or Tricky, he would get those guys into us. And so, but I mean, we fired everything, and a lot of it was my squad leaders working fire missions, call for fire missions. And so we fired conventional RD, we fired tons of HIMARS, tons of XCAL, mortars were in 60s, 81s, and we ended up getting a 120 out at the main base there. So I mean, every patrol, I mean, definitely mortars were firing, and it had an awesome mortar section in Kilo 35. Sometimes mortars were going out and firing, from the handheld for us. Sometimes they were firing from the more firing position back at patrol base fires, but mortars every day, artillery very, very often, a lot of XKL, but like I said, even some just kind of standard RD missions, and then CAS.
Where was your artillery firing from? Was it
I think Kajaki.
From Kajaki? Okay.
So my current boss actually is a guy named Carl Smitherman. He's a senior Marine at the Naval Academy, and I think he was the battalion commander of the RD battalion that was up in Kajaki firing for us.
Yeah.
And the HIMARS are coming out of Leatherneck.
Yeah. Man, HIMARS are great, aren't they? Those things are, the accuracy on those things are just, it's wicked. Can you tell us more about this Battle of Thanksgiving? Because I don't think it's been a while since I read Bing West's book. I don't know if it's covered in that or not, but I don't remember that specifically.
Yeah. second platoon was on their way outside of PB Transformer and was in heavy contact. And I think Will was bounding between one of those cornfields, and because he had some Marines pinned down, and he was moving to kind of the point of friction, like the great fighter leader that he was. And as he did that, he was shot in the head. And Sergeant Sotelo at the time then kind of started to take control of the platoon, and moving Will's body, you know, as Marines, we never leave a Marine behind. And it was a significant and an emotional event to kind of try to fight through that. And so third platoon, I was way out in the kind of far boundaries of our AO that day. I was in my own firefights that day. I think we found a cache that day, but it was third platoon was the closest platoon to second at that time, and Vic Garcia came in and with third platoon and fought their way to them and helped them move Will. And that's why I said Sergeant McCulloch ended up getting a Silver Star that day. Sotelo got a Silver Star that day, and all day we had just I mean, there's probably like over 40, 50. It was like a company minus of Taliban that they fought through that day. And so we had air.
That's crazy that there's that many people. That's crazy.
So it ended up being, you know, over 12 hours of fighting. And it was a significant. I mean, it has to be one of the bigger battles, and you know, Sangin being the most deadly battle that any battalion was in OEF history. And then that specific battle, the Battle of Thanksgiving, I think, was probably the biggest fight that we were in throughout the deployment.
What kind of weapon systems were the enemy employing during that battle?
Yeah, they had Dishkas, PKMs, AKs. They had what are the 30 millimeter kind of grenades. I think that's what they were fighting. So you know, they had those. They had some indirect fire capability, limited indirect fire capability, but RPGs all over the place. And then, you know, the primary weapon that they have is they know when we're near the. Sangin was a minefield, and so I don't know if I've clearly articulated that enough. That we were fighting the entire time in a minefield. Mm-hmm. And so anytime we were in a pocket of IEDs, they knew that, and they coordinated their ambushes to align with when we were near an IED, so that as soon as we started to kind of move around, we would strike those IEDs, and then they'd continue to fire. Let's say they usually had multiple IEDs kind of in place, and so once we hit a couple IEDs in the area, they would then break contact, right? That was their primary. They just wanted us to hit all those IEDs, and so. But yeah, I think it was a very well coordinated attack the day of the Battle of Thanksgiving, with weapons all the way up to like Dishkas, RPGs, grenades. So
the IEDs, man, you know, that's what you hear about. You know, and when I went to Sangin, man, I was so worried, you know, because I'd heard your guys' fight and, you know, follow on guys that have been there and stuff like that. And all I could think about was stepping on an IED, you know, like, fuck, man, we're going to hit an IED. This IEDs. Luckily, my advisor team never hit one. Our Afghans did. Multiple Afghans got killed by IEDs, but no one on our advisor team did. From my understanding, and you can tell me, like, their tactic that they were using was, like you said, they would wait until you're in an area with IEDs and then attack so that you move into cover, and then those, you know, suitable cover positions they would put in IEDs because they knew that's where you would move to once they initiated the ambush. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was definitely one TTP. They definitely put those IEDs in natural kind of positions of cover. But I would say that doesn't offer enough as to the kind of magnitude of the amount of IEDs that were there. I mean, they just littered the entire battlefield with IEDs, and so you could be walking through a field, you can be walking down a trail, you could be coming out of a canal. You know, Lieutenant Robert Kelly was killed by an IED on the kind of at the top part of a canal as he came out of a canal. He hit an IED. So they were really they were in the trees, they were in the doorways, they were scattered throughout the courtyards. I mean, it was, when I say minefield, I mean we found hundreds and hundreds of IEDs. And we struck a lot as well. So.
I had a friend that was with 3-5. Well, he wasn't. He was attached to the unit for that deployment, and he was saying as he would get ready to go out on patrol, and he was like, dude, I got to the point where I would just throw up before every patrol. He's like, it would take me a couple minutes, and then I would puke, and then it was like, all right, let's go, because he's like, I was just so scared. He's like, every time I walked outside, I thought I was going to hit an IED. How do you keep the will to fight up when guys are living in a state of fear like that?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, let me give credit to our combat engineers. We had a squad of engineers attached to Kilo Company, and 12 of the 13 of those engineers were killed or are now amputees.
Oh man, really? Jesus.
So there was no more dangerous job in the entire world than being a combat engineer in Sangin. And walking point out there, swinging a stick, trying to pick up an ID that had a non-metallic signature. Those guys walked point every day. And Lance Corporal Arden Benagua was one of my engineers who was killed in action. Corporal Spivey was wounded. We had Garcia, Yazi. I mean, the list goes on for those guys. Just what incredible bravery that those guys, and when your entire squad gets at some point and become, we, like I said, it was kind of all of us started to feel it's not a matter of if but when, but no one felt that weight more than those junior Marines out there swinging a stick. And those guys who walked point will forever have my just utmost respect and admiration. I think that the Spartans had a thing where they did like the fear shedding. So I think you come back to base and after maybe a close call or two, you kind of have the little shudder and but then you kind of just throw in a dip and you say who's got a Chili Mac MRE, but so you don't spend too much time thinking about it. Before going on patrol, I think you can't let that fear become contagious. And I think that's part of the role of the NCOs and the officers is that the Spartans had another term called calypsis or possession, and you can't let people kind of become possessed by that fear. And it's important to acknowledge like you have a vote. The enemy has a vote, but like we have a vote, and so we're going to go do what Marine infantrymen do, and we're going to go locate, close with, and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver. And so that's what we got to get out there and get after. And we understand that there's significant risks associated with that. And you do, as an officer, you do your due diligence where you plan and take every kind of measure that you can to ensure your Marine safety. But ultimately, by asking your Marines to cross the line of departure every day, you are accepting that you're asking your Marines to do something very, very hazardous and dangerous. And so I think you just can't think about it. You can't, if you start to dwell on it, again, I think that's what, I saw some units kind of go a little bit internal, and you can't dwell on the risks out there, and you got to just go out there and attack and get after it. And I don't know. I don't like what you're saying. That's why being titled this book 1 Million Steps. It's because like every step you are thinking, like, as you put that left foot down, you're like, okay, I still have my legs, I'm still alive. Then you put your right foot down and you think, okay, I still have my legs and I'm still alive. And that's like that's what you like that's what you're, unless you were in a fight. When you're in a fight, to me, once we started to get in a fight or once we had a casualty, I never really worried too much about that. But kind of as you're just walking around, getting out to wherever the objective is, yeah, I mean, every step you think, yeah, I'm happy that my legs are here on this step, but I'm not so sure they're going to be here on the next step. But when you're doing your PCCs and PCIs, your pre-combat checks and inspections, I'm not focused on the fear. I'm kind of making sure that we're lethal, we're ready, and that we've done the best mission planning that we can, and we're going to take a hard route, and we're going to take a route that was smart, and that we would think that we're going to take the least desirable route to get to where we go, because obviously what the Taliban's thinking and hoping is that we're going to take the path of least resistance or a high-speed avenues of approach, and so we're going to do the opposite, and we're going to go to the shittiest places. And I had really good point Marines, Murphy, Haggerty, Leahy, Gonzalez, these lance corporals who were really good at kind of planning these routes and really good catching these visual indicators of the IEDs. My point men kind of had these eagle eyes, and they'd see the disturbed earth or kind of something off, the anomaly in their baseline. And so, yeah, I think before I would go out on patrol, I don't know, I felt like I was going out with the 35 most bad motherfuckers on the planet, and that if anybody should be afraid, like the Taliban should be afraid, because I've got Sergeant Matabate with me, and he's about to wreck your day. And so I think that gives me kind of great confidence.
I'm glad you brought up earlier the amount of casualties you put on the Taliban, because that is definitely something that's not talked about very often. The deaths of the Marines, and I'm assuming, I'm not sure if you guys lost corpsmen. I'm assuming you did. The deaths of those people, though, from your unit overshadow a lot of the other stuff that happened there. So it's not like it, like you were saying before. There's definitely a two-way fight. You guys were definitely putting some hate and discontent on the enemy. Unfortunately, they have plenty of people that'll travel into Afghanistan from Pakistan or wherever to come and keep fighting and keep reinforcing and stuff like that. I want to move on to post deployment and stuff like that. But if there's anything else you'd like to talk about from that deployment or anything, just I don't want to move on too quickly. If there's something else you want to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that sometimes we're painted as victims in 3-5, and General Kelly, Lieutenant Robert Kelly's dad, will kind of tell you that warriors can never be victims, and he tells the story of Yale and Herder, the two guys out there in Ramadi who stood their post as the SV bid came down and said that they stood there 6 seconds to live, and they stood there with their feet planted, firing their weapon until they were killed. And so and that those guys were not victims, that they were warriors. And so I do want to challenge that narrative that poor 3-5 or that we were victims. If it was, there was lots of tragedy and some fucking sad things happen, but ultimately no doubt it was a story of us going out there and doing what warriors have done and always do. And we went out there and we slayed bodies, and for every one of us that was hit, we killed 10 Taliban easy. And so I know one of my snipers, Sergeant John Browning, he always gets pissed at, like, well, we got to make sure that this part of the story is getting told, because it doesn't get told enough. Sure. Before we just transition out of this part, is just the sacrifice and that these young men made, I think, is a story that has to be and must be told. And when I'm in a U-shaped ambush and every square inch of the canal that we're in is just raked with fire, and you see just 18-year-old kids jumping out of the canal, setting up a base of fire, and at no point considering their own self-preservation. And when you see a young kid like Lance Corporal in Benagua go swing that stick every day up until the point that he literally had his head blown off. I mean, when I've got my corpsmen, Doc Long and Collins, and that Doc B, like, out there patching these guys up under fire. And it just comes back to this, like, what did I do to deserve such a great privilege to serve and fight along such men like I did in Kilo 35? And their absolute selfless, courageous, valorous behavior is something that should forever be told, and is in keeping with the tradition of the Marine Corps. And so you can look at from Bellawood to Killzone to Fallujah to Sangin. What the Marines of 3.5 did, Kilo 3.5 did out there was in keeping in our traditions of the Marine Corps of being our warrior ethos and our warrior spirit. And it'll forever be my greatest privilege and opportunity to have had that chance to fight alongside and serve those men. So now I'm ready to.
I don't think anybody would counter that narrative, man. I think that's about a truest statement as you can get. The fight that these guys put out there. For me, I don't know. It's crazy. It's just the whole thing's crazy. Combat's crazy. The military's crazy. A regular person that may listen to this is going to be like, it was a privilege to be out there when all this was happening. Like, what is he talking about? It's hard to understand, I guess, unless you've ever been in an organization like the Marine Corps, and Army or whatever, whatever you're doing, like something like that, a fighting force where you're actually going out and, doing your job every day. And the people around you are doing their job every day. They're getting up and they're going to work, in the probably some of the worst conditions you could ever imagine, but they still get up and go to work. And, that's just a testament to your guys, your unit, and the Marine Corps. And I think that's an amazing thing. And I think the legacy of 3.5 and Sangin, is one that people still talk about, still know about, what happened there. And I wish there were more things like this where, you're talking about the engagements with the enemy and not so much how many casualties necessarily that 3.5 took. But because you're right, I think that's, it'd be a shame for that side of the story to get lost and to see the unit as being a victim of the Taliban when, like you said, you're tenfold, enemy casualties. When you were coming back from the deployment, when you guys were done, when it was over, what was like the mental health state of the unit? And how long did it kind of take you to get out of, to get back into the whole thing of the real world?
Yeah, at some point, Secretary Gates came out and visited us. He was the Secretary of Defense at the time, and the Assistant Secretary of Defense at the time, and or like the senior DoD guy with the Secretary came out on Christmas. Absolutely not, and thank God he did. But I think the Marine Corps at large is tracking that we've been in a pretty gnarly sit, and so there was everybody. There was a team of psychologists, San Mateo there to kind of as everyone came back to talk to and kind of debrief. So I think that was a little bit unique or different to have the whole kind of cadre of psychologists there to kind of evaluate everyone and seeing how everyone was doing. And I don't know. How was it coming back? It was good. It was good to be home. I mean, it was good to be in San Clemente crushing California burritos and having my toes in the sand. It was good that I had a toilet and porcelain toilet and shower. And so, I mean, there's a lot of things that it's good to be home. America's a pretty fucking great place. And so I was very happy to be home. We had our memorial ceremony where we brought all the wounded and all the Gold Star families were invited, escorted the Donnellys around that day, and I remember I spent some time with the Nguyen family that day and the Pito family that day, and there's a pretty iconic photo of all the memorial crosses kind of set up there on the HLZ where we did the memorial, and Sergeant Major Bushway out there doing that final roll call. Mm-hmm. And final roll call for 25 guys is something that will stick with you. So it was good to be home. It was good to be back with your family and your loved ones. It was good to kind of see some of the wounded guys came out and greeted us. And but yeah, it was complicated too. And there was how people came home and how people made that transition was kind of very different per person, how they made that transition back home.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the individual, everybody handles a situation like that differently. And that's the tough part about trying to, well, real quick, before we get into that, did your camera turn off on Skype? Because I lost your video. I just want to see if we can troubleshoot that real quick and then keep going on.
Says my camera's still up.
Can you turn it off and turn it back on just to see if that'll, if not, I'm just going to keep going because I don't want to interrupt this, but maybe it'll pop back up. I'm not sure what happened. But yeah, every individual deals with like tragedy, stress, combat stress, stuff like that differently. And that's the hard part, one of the hard parts of dealing with mental health issues in the Marine Corps and some of the stuff that guys are doing, because everyone's different and there's no one way to solve the problem of, coming back and just being kind of fucked up from it,
Yep.
What were some of the issues you saw? Did you guys have an issue? Like when guys come back, sometimes you'll see like when a unit comes back, everything's good, everyone's happy, we're home. But then a couple weeks later, that's when guys start seeing issues from guys because, the combat zone's not leaving them, or, now they're starting to deal with all the stuff they suppressed during that deployment. Is that something that you guys experienced?
Yeah. Let me try just one more second to troubleshoot this. I'll be right back.
Hey, and if for the people that are watching live, I appreciate you guys checking out the live stream. Feel free to throw in some questions if you have them. I can ask those along the way towards the latter half of the latter part of the podcast here. But appreciate you guys checking out the live stream. Make sure to share it with everyone. I'm planning on actually trying to do another live stream this evening. So I might have a second live stream going on. So make sure to check that out as well, and make sure to spread the word about the podcast. But once we get his video back up, we'll continue on.
I think that's what you're asking about.
Okay, so back on what we were talking about. Like, what did you notice? What kind of issues were you seeing, if any at all? What was the after effect of the war on some of your guys?
Yeah, definitely. There were some guys that went on to get in some legal trouble, no doubt. Some guys, General Mattis says that war has, and I think he was quoting Oliver Wendell Holmes, that war has a propensity to make good men better and bad men worse. And so some guys definitely came home and got themselves into some pretty significant trouble, I think. I know at least one of my corpsmen, he had his hands in a lot of different guys' guts, and
that's tough.
He felt obligated for each one of those guys that kind of slipped away. I remember specifically as he applied pressure to Corporal Tevin Nguyen's carotid artery and kind of watched one of his best friends in the platoon slip out of his hands, and understand. So I think some guys legitimately did have some significant post-traumatic stress. I think some guys felt a little bit entitled that they got back and like, well, I did Sangin, I don't need to do anything else now. And that was a little bit of an issue that I felt like we had to guard against, is that, you what you did was your duty. And what you did is what you signed up for. And so, I think some guys unfortunately kind of got felt, I think, maybe a little bit too entitled, and that wasn't good. But that was not a significant part of our population. I started to see some guys like kind of have cries for help on social media, or so saw some of that. I saw some guys needing like external validation from, once they kind of got out of the Marine Corps, they were like posting stuff, kind of still trying to kind of get a lot of attention. And it was confusing to me, because some of these guys were these super badass guys, and like, we all knew they were legit. We all knew they were badass. And so when I see these guys kind of trying to tell civilians, like demanding them, like thank them for their service, I'm like, why do you care what anybody else says? Like, we all know what you did. We all know that you're a badass. Like, why does it matter?
Plus, none of those people can understand it.
Yeah, that's what the next thing I was say. Like, they can never understand, like, the only validation you need is like from the team. And so like, you can't fake it in front of your team. Like your squad, your platoon, like they know you're the real deal or you're not, right? And so like, if we all know, then why does it matter what anyone else thinks? And so it was very confusing time, and it was and I didn't know kind of what to think with all the different issues that were going on with some of the guys that came home from 3-5. And I Spartans have a thing where they break the twigs, where you leave your human self when you go into battle. You kind of break and you leave all your humanity kind of back home, and then you go into battle kind of this baser, more savage animal self. And so there was the point where I broke the branch, and I became very much primal, savage, and animal, and I was able to kind of really compartmentalize a lot of things. And I think that helped in a lot of ways, but also it hurts in a lot of ways. There's Brian Shantosh, another 3-5 guy who I think ended up being a Navy Cross recipient for what he did in Iraq with 3-5. Talks about how you pack up the boxes, and so you have all this shit going on, all this bad stuff going on, and you kind of put it all in a box, and you put it up in the closet, and then more kind of stuff happens, and you put it in the closet, and eventually you end up filling up a warehouse with kind of all the stuff that you got to kind of just put away and store for a different time, because you don't really have, especially as a leader, you don't really ever have time to kind of deal with that kind of stuff. And how if you don't ever take the time to go back and start unpacking those boxes, they might just show up on your front door at a time you aren't ready, and it doesn't matter because now. And so I think that bit a lot of guys, like, for me, for example, in the ass, is like, but initially at least, I don't know. I saw a lot of guys with 3-5 kind of suffer with not suffer, but struggle with the transition. I think more than anything, it was the transition. And I think sometimes what we conflate too quickly with PTSD is some transition stress. And so, of course, when you were in Sangin, we were receiving like hundreds of letters and care packages from churches and Boy Scouts and all these people who was like saying like, dear soldier, and you have these little twisted kids who draw the pictures where you're mowing everybody down with like a machine gun, and like, thank you for protecting our country, and you're in the news, and you get back, and everyone wants to buy you a drink, and everyone and you really had a purpose, right? And you felt like you were part of something special. If you read Younger's Tribe, it's not so much that people have a difficulty dealing with hardship. What people have the thing that people struggle with is like not feeling important or useful. And the Marine Corps issues you both, right? They issued you us a purpose, and that purpose is never kind of more significant or substantial than when you're in combat. And that tribe and that community and that squad, that brotherhood is never stronger than when you're under fire. And so all these guys, like I was a machine gunner, like I was somebody, and that was really important, and people depended on me with their lives. And now I'm out of the Marine Corps, and I got home, and people initially thought I was important, and now over time people kind of don't notice me as much, and I don't have that connection, and so I think it's really normal to kind of maybe struggle with that transition stress as you go from something that was so meaningful, and that you were so connected with some people that you were literally all willing to die for one another, and now you are in this back to our culture, which is very individualistic and selfish, and it must be very foreign, to a young 22-year-old who spent the last 4 years of his life part of something like the Marine Corps. And the other thing that I think we really messed up was, is we wanted to tell combat veterans that, like, if you are sad, or if you feel lonely, or if you feel angry, like there's something wrong with you. You're from 3-5 and you feel angry, or you feel isolated, you feel like we immediately kind of said, you must be damaged, you must be broken. And it's like, no, I think that's pretty human. I think human beings naturally have seasons or time periods where they feel sad, or they feel angry, or they feel lonely, they feel disconnected. And so let's not immediately jump to like, there's now something is wrong with you. It's like,
yeah, I think, a lot of guys, it seems like they have issues when they get out and stuff because, it's hard to find a job that has as much meaning as something like that, where I'm going out and depending on someone else for my life, like my life is on the line. I was telling, I was telling my neighbor, I was like, yeah, as a JTAC man, I had joint fire observers, my JFOs, and my whole deal was like, and the other guys on so for my advisor team deployment, I was telling them like, my whole deal is I'm trying to kind of give these guys a little rundown of how to do my job. Because if I get smoked in the head, someone's got to pick up the radio, and he's just like, what? Like, that I could even talk like that. Like, okay, well, if I get killed, then this needs to happen. Like I'm planning like it's just another thing. And the seriousness of the job, and I don't know, man, it's hard to put words to it, but it's just not gonna, it's gonna be hard to find something that can hold as much meaning and can be as fulfilling as being in the military and being around, your brothers and sisters in uniform and stuff like that, and being around a group of people that are all working towards a single goal of accomplishing the mission or whatever. And then, I don't know. It's tough for guys, especially younger guys. I came in when I was 22. I was a little bit older. I lived on my own for 4 years and stuff. So I had a little bit of life experience. And, a lot of these guys get out when they're 22, and their life experience at that point has been high school and then possibly combat. And then now they're back out in the real world trying to just be a regular dude. And I don't think after seeing something, especially something like what you guys went through, like how do you come back and just become a regular dude? And I think the problem is that not enough people come to the realization that you're not going to be a regular dude. You're going to be a combat vet for the rest of your life. And you need to use that as like, hey, that's just a part of who I am. And let's go on to the next thing. What's my next thing I got to do? I can't just live, on my war stories and ride my laurels to the end. I need to keep setting goals and accomplishing goals and stuff like that. And it seems like a lot of guys that run into mental health issues and stuff after they get out are guys, one, that lose contact with everybody that they were in the military with. They drop off the radar. You don't hear about them for a while. And so that right there is big. I think guys need to reach out to other guys more often. And two, guys just not getting over the fact that you're probably not going to find another job that has as much meaning as being in the Marine Corps. And, it's tough. I like that piece that you sent me that you wrote, and you were talking about how, the victimhood mentality that a lot of people will go through, and start to have, and it's kind of pushed on by external, forces, by other people trying to make you into a victim. And a big thing for me, I'm a college student now, right? I got out in 2018. I went right into Miracosta College in Oceanside, and then now I'm at San Diego State University. And what I've seen is that every person I meet that doesn't have any kind of association with the military has zero idea about what the military does and automatically assumes that I'm a combat vet with PTSD and, like every veteran is a killer and has PTSD and can snap at any point. And it's a really gross misrepresentation of veterans, and it's a bad understanding of what the military is and does as a whole. And I think that mischaracterization of who we are and what we did and what we do really drives a lot of guys' mental health down, because they get kind of beat down like, am I a victim? Do I have PTSD? Is this, and then you get it. Some guys like it. They get attention from it. Like, oh, look, woe is me. I'm the victim. I don't know, man. It's a tough world to navigate once you leave the military. I mean, you're still in it. You're still surrounded by it and stuff. But once you get out and you come to the realization that no one cares, if I go outside right now and grab someone off the street and go, hey, do you know who Kilo 35 is? Have you ever heard of Sangin? And they're going to be like, no, they're not going to know. And that's a tough pill for some guys to swallow. And, I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are on that and the whole victimhood thing, but I did like that piece you sent me, and I agree with some of your points there about people that just want to become a victim or allow themselves to become a victim.
In those moments of in 1 hour and saying, and then like most people will have in an entire lifetime. So like, there's nothing to pity about me. And yes, again, I have, but I also have proven and validated and had experiences that are truly just so remarkable and so incredible. And so, there's nothing to pity, and I'm not going to compete in this victim Olympics and try to use my experiences to kind of increase my standings in this victim Olympics. And so, I think all of us have to kind of take some ownership of that as veterans and kind of refuse those labels, and instead kind of elevate the narrative around veterans in combat. Say, I'm not fragile, I'm not damaged, and I'm not broken. I'm a gosh damn warrior. And hopefully, again, it's not to deny that many veterans have legitimate PTSD. It's not to deny that we do really kind of suffer some harm, but all of us have the agency to kind of determine how long and how much we suffer. And so maybe we, as an 18-year-old kid, you were thrown into combat and you suffered from some things, no doubt. But I think all of us have the ability to kind of at some point decide how long and how much we're going to continue to suffer, and at some point we have to take back the narrative and have some agency in our lives and ultimately kind of grow from those experiences.
Yeah, definitely, man. And that's definitely what guys need. That's the growth, the understanding that this happened. I made it through this. Like you said, that warrior mentality, like, I don't know, man. It's just, I feel like I'm kind of babbling about it, but it's tough to talk about. It's tough to for people. I'm trying to put it in easily understandable terms, but yeah, well, what you're saying is exactly right, though. You got to come back from that and understand that what you did was not something that hindered you or your life necessarily. Obviously, there are people that it did, but for the most part, like, you have to use that as a lesson learned, a life lesson that most people will never experience. And, and I think that's part of the reason why we're in the state that we are in now in this country, where, everyone looks at how they can be a victim. And, like, the victim mentality in the country is really bad right now, and the I don't know, the non-appreciation of how good people have it because they've never had it bad. You know, that's one of those things that you come back from a combat zone or something like Sangin, and you just like, I'm a happy-go-lucky guy. I appreciate every day because I'm just like, you know what, man? I'm sitting here, San Diego. I can go watch the sunset today over the Pacific Ocean, or like, I don't know. It's just
Yeah, I think that's where you're, like that last kind of little example is like, I don't take a single sunrise or sunset for granted. I don't, I have this renewed appreciation for life and life's little details. Every sunset to me is kind of do another evolution, or around the sun, or whatever, and just how much what an incredible blessing that is. And we can say, like, adversity and hardship are not things that we should shun. Hard times make hard people, and we should welcome that adversity and that struggle, because that's where we find the meaning, and that's where the growth comes from. And unless you've kind of had to go do something hard, or struggle through something, you're not likely to kind of grow. And so, yeah, I think it's something that we shouldn't shun. It's something that we should welcome. And so, yeah, I'm ultimately very grateful for the opportunity to have the opportunity to fight.
Yeah. So we're just over 2 hours, man. I want to give you time. I'd like to. I want to talk about you because you did another deployment as an advisor, and you also went to recon battalion and stuff like that. I want to talk about all that, but I don't think we'll get to it today, only because I don't want those stories to be lost. And I know some people aren't going to go 3 hours into a podcast, so I'd like to have you come back on. But before I let you go, though, I want to give you some time to talk about your Instagram page and kind of what you're doing with that.
Yeah, so I started Killzone when I was at Georgetown. So when I finished up company command in Lima 3-4 out in 28 Palms, I applied to come teach literature at the Naval Academy, and they sent me to Georgetown for a year to get my master's. And I spent the year kind of exploring these narratives, these trauma narratives, looking all the way back to Homer, and then spent a lot of time kind of looking at the Vietnam War literature, so Matterhorn, the things they carry, what it's like to go to war, Fields of Fire, and The Village, and then looking at a lot of the film around Vietnam, and seeing how this homogenous view of veterans that they became damaged, broken, and were unable to kind of return. And so I wanted to explore different ways to elevate that narrative, or maybe write a new chapter and how veterans kind of experience combat. So I started Killzone to kind of, two things, like, so how can we be more resilient? How can we sustain less damage when we end up in those ambushes? How can we have increased situations? These ambushes are coming, and maybe make ourselves a harder target to ambush. And then ultimately acknowledging that no matter how much of a hard target you are, how much of situational awareness you have, you're going to end up ambushed at some point. And then how do you get off the X? How do you stop the bleeding? How do you start the recovery? And so, we don't do a great job in the military talking about having the self-awareness to say, okay, like, where am I hurt? Where am I harmed? And how do I stop that bleeding? How do I start to get better? And so I try to just equip us with some tools to kind of be a little bit more resilient on the front end, which diminishes the amount that we kind of damage that we suffer when we do get that ambush, but then some different pathways to kind of start that recovery and move towards that growth. And so that's why I started Killzone. And so what I was doing is, while I was at Georgetown, I was doing open mic nights for veteran storytelling. And so I was going to talk in coffee shops or whoever would have me, and I was trying to tell this story, and to whoever would listen. And so I just used the Instagram platform initially to kind of start to put some of that out there. And then it's kind of grown into, I'll always kind of be interested in talking about veterans and mental health and those issues, but I've also kind of evolved into some, now I teach at the Naval Academy, and studying and writing and reading all the time about literature and leadership, and thinking about literature and leadership. So now the page, I talk about a lot about literature. I talk a lot about leadership and the intersection of literature and leadership. And it's been a great platform. There's several other kind of veteran pages out there that are trying to elevate the narrative. around veterans in combat and are trying to be educational and provide healthy places to have these kind of discussions. And it's really been inspiring to kind of be just one of these veteran voices out there on social media that's trying to help make other veterans better, to help capture some of these lessons that we've learned and continue to kind of sharpen, like iron sharpens iron, and just be a tool out there and a resource. And so that's what I'm doing. And, I'm still teaching, still active duty. And I anticipate that next year I'll be sitting as a battalion XO somewhere. So we'll see where we go with that, but I'll continue to run the Killzone page to kind of provide a space where we can all kind of examine ideas of veterans' mental health and kind of leadership and literature is what we're
awesome,
doing there.
Man. It's the more I hear guys talking about stuff like that, getting involved, the better, because it's the platforms like yours. I think you said you just hit 10,000 followers on Instagram. So one, congrats on that. Two, that just shows that you're having a reach to people, and there's veterans that are out there back at their hometown, sitting in their house thinking that no one understands what they're going through, or no one understands what they did, or their, that past. And the reach of social media and the ability to reach out to people and do stuff like this podcast, where we can live stream and talk about these issues. I think it's bringing the awareness up for people. And I think it can only be good, because it helps guys understand that they're not the only, they're not alone in this, like, after the fight, they're not alone. We're still here. The veteran community is still alive, and that there are people that you can reach out to and talk to. And you know what? It's okay to talk about your story. It's okay to tell that combat story and to inform people about what you might have done or experienced, and I encourage people to do that. Not in a braggadocious kind of way where you're like, oh, I slayed 4,000, don't be a douchebag, but like the general public needs to know what's going on in these combat zones. They need to know the impact of sending our young men and women to war, and what that does to them, and what it does to their friends and stuff like that. And, yeah, man. So I'm all about any kind of awareness for that. Shout out to Robert Myers for linking us up, and helping to get your story out there and tell not only about, the casualties that Kilo 3-5 and 3-5 as a whole took, but, the war that you fought, the fighting, the war and the fight that you took to the enemy. Yeah, man, I think it's just great. I'm just glad that, one, you're doing this and more people are doing it. And two, I'm glad you came on the podcast to talk about it and kind of spread the word and let people know that, you were in one of the worst, like you said, some of the worst battles in Afghanistan, and that doesn't have to be the end for you. There's more to life than that. There's more to life than that. Is one piece of your life that's always going to be there. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you need to see that as an addition to whatever else you're going to do with your life, and not as something that's dragging you down. So is there anything else you'd like to cover before we let you go?
No, man, you hit it. Thanks for the opportunity coming on today and having this platform because there is power in telling our stories, and it is important to know that that's a chapter, but that we're still writing. A lot of the best pages of our story are still yet to come, and we're writing them right now. And so, I think this has been an awesome opportunity.
No problem, man. And I'll contact you, and we'll set up something in a few months or something to have you back on, do a follow up, and talk about some of your other deployments and what life is like going from being a infantry platoon commander in Sangin to being a literature instructor or professor at the Naval Academy. That's got to be kind of a two different worlds completely,
Yep.
So
it sure is.
So everybody out there, for the people that came in on the live stream, I appreciate it. Appreciate the comments and stuff on the live stream. Make sure to check out my Instagram page. It's at Former Action Guys and at J Kramer Graphics, both of those. You can hit me up at on Twitter, #4 MER Action Guys, and then Killzone for Thomas here. So let me get the actual, because you got it a little different. So Killzone, KILL.Z0N3 on Instagram. Thanks for coming on to the Former Action Guys podcast, and I hope you have a good weekend, man.
Thanks, brother.